And I'm very excited to be joined on this episode by Amy Kilpin. Hello, Amy.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Not at all. Would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yes. Well, it's a bit of a random one, really. I never really know how to introduce myself. I am a marketing consultant. I set up my company in 2014. I work with quite a wide range of clients, mostly London-based companies across all sorts of different industries. I'm also a triathlete. Sometimes I lead with the business and sometimes I lead with the triathlon stuff. But yeah, I compete at quite a high level, world championship level as an amateur. I was actually borderline going professional at the end of 2019 before COVID hit. So we'll see where that goes now. But to be honest, I'm quite focused on my work. And I also climb mountains, as you can see with the picture in the background.
So a sort of like a broad range of, and I'm going to be really interested to see how, as we get into the conversation, kind of how you pull those disparate elements together in your life, really, how those things kind of feed each other. So let's get started. You ready? Should we get into it?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so could you tell us about something that you wish you'd learnt sooner?
Yeah, so do you know what? I think the thing that I wish I'd learnt sooner is that just life moves by really, really quickly. Before you know it, you're an adult and you're kind of drifting a bit. I think I've bucked that sort of, I've made sure I haven't been drifting, but it's still, it's difficult how quickly life moves by. And I think my philosophy personally is that I try and just grasp every moment and fit as much as I possibly can into my life. But I do reflect a little bit on my teenage and I guess early 20s, even as a child, actually, that I probably could have focused more on one thing. I was one of those people that was never good at one thing. I just kind of flitted about. But to get really, to excel at something, be really, really good at something, you have to dedicate a lot of time and passion into it.
So what you're describing there sounds quite familiar, because I think for a lot of my kind of late teen, early 20s kind of life, was quite, I guess, fixed mindset, in the sense that I would only be as good at something as I was naturally. Is that kind of what you're talking about there? That kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I get, well, there's a couple of different ways to look at that. It's not obviously just the things that you're good at naturally. I think it's the things you're interested in, the things you love. You can be good at something naturally as a kid, but not particularly enjoy it. And then people just, fall off. There's so much untapped potential in children and young people, but they lack the interest and the passion, the dedication. So it's that kind of sweet spot of having a natural interest in something, potentially a natural talent. But it doesn't always work like that.
Because there's that point, isn't there, where I guess interest and talent has to give way to actually putting the work in.
Yeah. I mean, when I started triathlon over 10 years ago now, there was no natural talent. I don't come from a swim, bike or run background. I started it as an adult. I couldn't swim one length of front crawl, and I've competed on every continent, obviously, apart from Antarctica, multiple world championships, and, borderline about to get a professional license. So, and that is purely down to hard work and dedication, because there were so many points where I thought I should just give up. This is humiliating. I was coming last.
So what drew you into, if you weren't a swimmer and you weren't, what drew you into the triathlon as your thing? How did you end up with that as your thing?
The challenge, I think. So I started working full time out of university as a journalist, and I really enjoyed the work, but I didn't just want my life to be defined by my job title and my 9 to 5. I wanted something outside of my working life. So I started kind of doing some running challenges, and started out quite small because obviously I wasn't a runner, and then just built it up. And the next thing I wanted to tick off the list just for the challenge really was a triathlon, but then I got quite hooked by the lifestyle that it gave me.
Okay. And how did you push through the whole being last thing? How did you get from that point where you were, okay, well, this is humiliating, which was the word you just used, through to, I'm going to continue to put the work in until I'm, borderline going professional? What was that journey like?
I think just pure stubbornness. I didn't want to give up, and I guess I had to rationalize it to a degree that I don't care what people think about me, because I'm not doing this for them, I'm doing it for myself. So I'd turn up at races, and a kayak would actually accompany me out of the water because I was the last swimmer on the course and I could barely swim. It was quite embarrassing. They were closing down aid stations behind me after I'd gone through because I was the last person on the bike. But I think just a stubbornness, that no, I'm not going to give up, I'm not going to quit. I know I can keep pushing, and I know I can, prove to myself that I can get through this and be okay. I didn't, in a million years, I didn't think I'm going to be competing at a high level in this sport. I was just doing it for the journey, for the challenge. It was a personal challenge.
Oh, actually, this is all right. At what point did that? At what point did the penny drop that actually it was working out?
I think I was quite clouded in the place where I started for quite a long time. And by that, I mean, because I wasn't very good at it, it took me a long time to actually adjust to that reality that I had become good at it. So I think 2019 was the year where I was kind of thinking, actually, no, I'm getting legit results. Anybody who's ever said that I'm not very good at triathlon, and whatever I've thought of myself in the past of not being very good, I've kind of proved it now, but it took a long time. That was a long journey, 9 years.
The way you describe that has been hard work and a journey to go from one place to another, and a mindset journey as much as a physical journey, I imagine. How's that manifested itself in other parts of your life as you've been going on that journey? What else has changed for you?
So much. I genuinely don't think I'd be the person I am in business, in life, without that. It sounds a little bit cliche, but I just, that kind of dedication, that commitment, those kind of values that it brings you on a really micro level. Like, so me setting my alarm at 5 a.m. every day to train before work and training for an Ironman and knowing that I can do an Ironman just sets you up for success in business and in life, because I know that I've got the sort of the commitment and the determination and the motivation to get up early and train first thing in the morning, last thing at night, whatever it takes. I'll give whatever I can to whatever I'm pursuing. I think also, so I did an interesting thing actually at the beginning of this year when we were in lockdown. I did a full 180 kilometer, which is the length of an Ironman bike leg, on my turbo trainer, which is my indoor static bike. So you're in a room on a static bike, and it took me 6 hours. And people were like, why are you doing that at this time of year? You don't need those kind of fitness gains when there may not even be any races. And as it happened, there weren't for quite a long time. And I said to myself and to others who asked me and questioned why I was getting into that kind of madness, it was purely for the mental challenge. Because I said, if I know I can sit on a turbo trainer in a room on my own for 6 hours, then I can, whatever challenges come my way, I can, because I've had the mental resilience, every single minute I wanted to get off that bike. It's not like it wasn't cruisy, I wanted to get off all the time, but not getting off and carrying on and having that kind of stubbornness and persistence teaches you a lot.
Do you think, is there anything that comes to mind that you think you'd done differently if you'd realized how fast life moves when earlier? So if you had learned this thing that we talked about earlier, is there anything that springs to mind that you think you would have done differently?
I think if I could change my childhood, I would have got into sport earlier. I think sport is absolutely critical to mental and physical development. And right. I personally think every company out there should be hiring athletes. Not obviously every person has to be an athlete, but an athlete, you develop such a level of dedication that I think is pretty special to athletes. And I was never an athlete growing up. I didn't do any sport. So I think I did try, I dabbled, I did a bit of this and that, but I didn't really stick it in a thing. And I think now I have been able to do that. I would have pushed myself probably to get into sport earlier and probably stick at something.
Okay. So this question sometimes ends up being related, sometimes doesn't, but I'm interested to know, was there a book or a concept or something that you learned at some point along the way that kind of fundamentally gave you a shift and made you think about things different?
Yes, there's a few, and they affect different areas of my life in terms of that. I would say one of the pivotal books I read is a book called With Winning in Mind by Lani Bassam. And I was actually reading it at the time when I was really big into climbing. Before I got into triathlon, I was really big into rock climbing. Obviously, still doing a bit of mountaineering now, but really, really into rock climbing. And I read this book, and it's a guy who, I think he's an Olympic shooter. And he wasn't, obviously started out and then just decided he wanted to became a gold medalist Olympic shooter. And and it sounds so obvious, the concept that whatever you manifest in your mind plays out in your body. It's really simple. We all know that, but it just describes it in such an amazing way. It really resonated with me that, the power of thought and the power of positive thinking is so impactful in terms of performance and output. And it doesn't matter. You don't need to be an athlete. This can apply to absolutely anything. Just having that positive mindset and that kind of intentional mindset makes such a big difference in life. And I think that was a really pivotal one for me, because after I read it, I was just climbing stuff I never thought I'd be able to climb. And because I'd always just look at the wall and be like, I can't climb that instantly. Mm-hmm. But actually, you start to kind of reframe it and think, yeah, no, I'm going to climb it. I'm going to nail it. And then what happens? You climb it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's a really useful skill that I've applied to lots of areas in my life.
You said you had a couple.
Yeah, I read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. I think, it's created quite a lot of, it's generated quite a lot of publicity in the past, and I think people are quite aware of it. But for me, the power of outsourcing was pretty critical in, that kind of learning the power of outsourcing from that. And that's something I've kind of adopted over the years as I've got busier, and you kind of weighing up the cost of your time versus someone else's time, and just that kind of economy of time. And it's how I make quite a lot into my day, because I am fully on board with outsourcing.
So this is kind of like only doing things that only you can do, and kind of having your time focused on the things where you're adding value, as opposed to be successfully.
Not just that, but just, things that it doesn't make sense for me to do. So it's not necessarily things I can't do, or, it's actually where do I want to put my energy and my focus. So as privileged as it sounds, actually about in May or June this year, I hired a housekeeper. I'd always had a cleaner, but I realised I was spending at least 2 hours a day just doing chores. And I thought, this is not a good investment of my time, because I'm trying to juggle my business and my training, and doing chores is just detracting from that. And something's got to give somewhere. So I can't outsource my work very easily. I can to a degree. I definitely can't outsource my training. Just pay someone to go and do it. I'm not going to get very fit that way. So I outsource all my housework. That somebody else just manages my house now, and I find it's a game changer.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm just trying to work out if that would work for my kids. So let's think a little bit about that, like the workflow and the things that you do, and the way that you work, and how you do the stuff that you do. What is something that, and you can't have your phone or your laptop, because people always say phone or laptop, but what is something that you absolutely couldn't live without, you use every day, is kind of like fundamental to kind of the way that you work and the things that you do?
Yeah, so one of the other books or concepts that I was going to also mention is Getting Things Done, GTD. That's changed my life, because I'm juggling so many different components. I'm actually a sponsored athlete, so I have athlete obligations to the various brands that I represent. There's a kind of whole piece of my life, my training, my coach, my sponsors, and then there's all my clients as well. So there's so many components, and then obviously, my house, domestic stuff, my dog, all the kind of normal stuff. But it's a whole holistic system. So the tool that I couldn't live without, where my whole GTD system sits, is Evernote. My entire life is on Evernote. All my reference material, things that I come across that I might one day want to go back to, like useful websites, all of my client work, it's all kind of coded by client, and by obviously whether it's a personal item or a work item. And yeah, for me, it's a total game changer, because I can keep track of everything.
Evernote's been around a long time as well, isn't it? Like, it's one of the sort of like OG knowledge management tools, and there's a lot that kind of seem to be cropping up. Knowledge management seems to be the new sort of like app that people are being drawn to, or that new ones are coming out. What is it about Evernote particularly that you like, that you were drawn to in the first place?
I mean, there's nothing that fancy, or certainly I don't use any of this sort of fancy function. There's a few, obviously you can display all of your lists in quite a simple way. I have the premium version, which means you can access it from any device, offline or online, which I think helps, because I could be, on the underground or something, and I'm trying to put something into my, and that's quite handy. You can also click web pages. And so if I'm reading an article and I don't have time to read it right now, to come across it on the internet, you can click the web pages into your Evernote system, so you can put it there as a read later. medium review. Yeah, and it's fairly simple software. I think it probably has functionality features that I don't use. Those are the main things, really. Just the fact that you can access it on any device. I've got it on my phone, my tablet, and my laptop, and I use it on planes because I'm obviously referring to it and writing up emails, drafting emails in there. Yeah, it's pretty flexible, versatile.
When you get a tool that you really sort of gels for you and that you use everywhere, it does kind of become like a third arm or something, doesn't it? It becomes absolutely indispensable from that perspective. So I guess also having something that's really reliable, and as I say, like Evernote's been around for a long time, so it clearly has a sort of like good customer base, really reliable. You know, it's not going anywhere. Kind of that sort of reliability is quite comforting with those kind of tools as well. I say that as someone flits around tools constantly and is always trying new things, and then like they go under, and I'm kind of like, oh, I like that one, I'll have to go and find something new. So yeah, I can sort of see how having something that when you really depend on it, having something that you know is going to be available to you no matter where you are. I mean, it's a key part of GTD is is your externalized brain, I suppose, as well. Great. So a bit of a flip on that, and thinking about kind of rather than something that you've used for years and that you're completely reliant on, what was the last shiny thing that you brought into your world with that you either bought or acquired? What was the last thing that you just kind of, oh, I'm really enjoying having got that thing?
So I actually bought this pretty standard, really, I guess, but I bought this glass noteboard for my desk, and it's on a sort of a lean. It's really cool. It looks really slick, apart from anything. It's obviously you're in a nice workspace, but I just, it annoyed me going through pages of notes that are all scribbled, and then I'd have to transfer the notes into my Evernote system anyway, so they actually make sense, because otherwise I can't read them. I'm making notes in me killing trees because I'm just writing pages and pages of paper. Actually, this glass noteboard, you have a little chalk pen, and you just make a couple of notes in meetings and then transfer it into my system, on Evernote, and then you can just wipe clean, and I love it.
So this is kind of like glass dry erase things, I guess, that you probably imagine seeing in my head now. This is like when you've got they're hunting a serial killer and they've just got notes everywhere, and there are those big glass boards with kind of like lines joining things up, probably on something like, I don't know, the bridge or something like that. Is that the kind of thing we're talking about?
It's much smaller. It's like the size of it just sits on your desk. It's really handy for note taking in meetings, and then after meetings I just quickly transfer the notes.
Have you been tempted to write on other things with the chalk pen?
Things.
Yeah, just like windows. I don't know. I would just be, I wonder if it works in the shower, and I'd just be writing on other things. No, just me.
I've actually got a glass desk, but because it's kind of a black glass, I just don't like the idea of writing on it. I'm quite clean and tidy, and it just freaks me out. What if it didn't come off? But I know it comes off because I'm wiping it off. It's written on my desk, but that would make my desk look really messy. So I like it just in one place on the little,
And is that kind of note taking and capture, and then you transfer that into your system as kind of like a clarify step? Is that how you sort of use it?
Yeah, all the actions and all reference items, or I'm waiting for something from somebody else, that all goes into the system afterwards, but it's just for scribbling while I'm in a meeting.
Fantastic. Yeah, because I'm big on paper. Like I'm for sort of that kind of thing, and I absolutely trawl through like rainforests worth of like small bits of paper, because my writing's quite expressive, would probably be the polite way of saying it, and so I'd end up with just kind of like probably 2 words on a piece of paper, and then it's kind of like, right, I want to the next one. And it works very well as it's very portable and so on, but I am really aware of the fact that I'm probably I get through a lot of note paper doing that, so I quite like the idea of something that's a bit more reusable, certainly, just finding the right thing. Excellent. Okay, so we're into the final question now, the home straight on this one, and I'd like you to finish a sentence for me, Amy. I'd like you to finish the sentence. Do yourself a favor and
go after whatever you want. It sounds kind of cliched, but I am kind of thinking nothing is in, and I think there's a lot of state of mind stuff that's applicable to life, and really, I just think you create your own fate. And I have experience of that, and I know it sounds like a potentially a bit of a weak example, but with the triathlon stuff, I've completed 2 full Ironmans, 10 marathons, 40 half Ironmans in the space of 10 years. And I started out not being able to do any of those three things, swimming, cycling and running. And it's enabled me to do so much other stuff. I've climbed most of Europe's highest mountains, and it's scary and it's hard, but it is a state of mind. I do believe that you can do stuff that you want to do. If you're not waking up every day excited about what's ahead of you, then something needs to change. I just think you need to make sure you're happy what you're doing and what you're pursuing, because life's short, right?
How do you go about deciding what it is you're focusing on? Because it's about focus, right, isn't it? It's about targets. How do you decide what it is you're focusing on, and what, by extension, I guess, what you're not focusing on?
Yeah, so I do this interesting exercise around this time of year, actually, in December every year. I write down different areas of my life, like professionally, work, relationships, family, friends, personal development, sport, health, fitness, house, financial, spiritual, whatever, all of the areas of my life. I write down all the things that I feel I've accomplished, not just in terms of like raw accomplishment, but first experiences. For example, like I took my niece climbing the other day, and I'm exposing her to a world where you are taught to be brave and push through your fear boundaries and move outside of your comfort zone, rather than being told, you're pretty. I just think that's so cool for kids to learn that kind of stuff. She got scared, but she overcame it. She cried. And I just think, that's a really valuable lesson. And yeah, I just think if you're not setting yourself targets every year of what you want to achieve the next year, then potentially you're going to lose your way a little bit. So during that exercise where I'm writing down the things that I've achieved, or the things I've accomplished, or things I've experienced, I'll then do a plan for the next year ahead in those different areas of my life. Do I need to focus more on spirituality, for example? Or do I need to focus more on my relationships? Have I not been giving enough time to my family? Or do I have certain targets with my sport or my business, financial targets or whatever? So yeah, I sit down and I do that exercise, and I think then on a macro level, you've got a really holistic view of where your life is going. You can also celebrate the wins, because I think too many people achieve stuff and then kind of don't really acknowledge it. And then just, make sure that the day-to-day stuff that you're doing is all contributing to that bigger stuff.
So it's kind of and I suppose to go back to GTD, that's your higher horizon stuff that you're then basing your projects and actions all feed into those higher horizon goals and vision. Is that kind of how you think of it?
Yeah, exactly that. Making sure that what you're doing is aligned with fundamentally why you think you exist on the planet, what your values are, what drives you on a deeper level, and then just kind of feeding that down to the stuff you're doing on a day-to-day. And yeah, that's it. The horizon focus model is a really good sort of way to kind of grasp those kind of projects that you're doing, and why they're contributing to bigger stuff that's more important to you in your life.
So I mean, a little bit off topic, but given we're recording this a couple of days before Christmas, so in a week or so's time, there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff about New Year's resolutions and about people making changes and trying to, next year I'm going to do this differently. What advice would you give to someone who wants to try and change up their life and are setting themselves New Year's resolutions, who maybe historically hasn't been great at it? Like what would you say they should do differently to get to have the kind of experience that you've had with?
Yeah, I think obviously it depends what it is, and I have a lot of intrinsic motivation. So, and I know a lot of people struggle, with that kind of motivation, self-motivation. So I would say bite-size objectives and goals, because sometimes something you want to achieve can feel very out of reach for some people. And obviously it's a bit of a speculative conversation. It depends what it is. But yeah, tangible bite-size goals to get to where you want to get to. Break it down, basically. Because I think, if I'd said to myself 10 years ago, right, by 10 years, I want to be getting a professional license in triathlon, I would have just laughed at myself. In fact, even if I'd said, 10 years ago, I'm going to be running my own company in 10 years' time, I would have laughed at myself. It feels out of reach. It just feels unfathomable. And then it happens, but it happens through progression. So I think you've got to see sort of forward progress in small areas, and eventually the consistency and the commitment and the persistence and the dedication.
So there's a twofold thing. It's about having that it's about having a drive to achieve a thing, and so I guess there's a bit of a why in there. And it's one of the things that I think maybe with resolutions people sometimes miss is they go, well, I want to do this, but they don't, I'm going to go to the gym every week, but they don't really recognize why they're deciding they want to do that. Like what's the driver for what would be the reason they do it? And then it's actually from that point, setting yourself little incremental targets of, okay, well, I'm going to do this many things, or I'm going to aim to go to the gym, this many times during the first week or something, and not trying to sort of crack it all in week one. It's interesting as well, I think, because I think people know that fundamentally, that, if you set yourself too high a goal, then you'll fail quickly if you try and achieve something too much. But for whatever reason, there's something about the idea of changing a small thing. I don't know, it's not very Instagrammable, is it?
Everest, just start with your local hill. It is, but I completely agree with you on the why. You definitely got to have that motivation. You've got to find out what it is you want, which goes back to my, go after whatever you want. Because if what you want ultimately is, something that you're not currently embarking on or pursuing, just figure out how to get there. But, along the way, you're going to have to break it down, because it will feel very out of reach potentially in the early stages. But yeah, definitely having that kind of intrinsic motivation as to why your reason to believe in that thing is really fundamental.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Amy, for joining us, and do yourself a favour. Would you like to tell people where they can find you?
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, I've got a website, amykilpin.co.uk, and I'm all over all the socials, I think mostly as A Kilpin.
Excellent. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.